It's a Friday night in 1962. A 16-year-old kid grabs the keys to his dad's Bel Air, picks up 3 friends, and just disappears for 4 hours. No phone check-ins. No tracking app pinging his location to a worried parent's screen. No group chat blowing up with "Where are you guys?" He just vanishes into the night, and everyone trusts that he'll turn up by curfew, a little windblown, smelling like a drive-in hamburger, full of stories nobody will ever fully hear. That world is gone. Not gone like a building gets torn down, but gone in a quieter way, the way a season changes without anyone announcing it. And today we're going back there, into the world teenagers used to live in, a world that shaped an entire generation and then disappeared so completely that most kids alive today wouldn't recognize it at all. Let's start with something so basic it's almost invisible now: boredom. Teenagers in the 50s and 60s were bored constantly, and that boredom wasn't a problem to be solved, it was the soil everything else grew out of. There was no screen to fill the silence. No endless scroll to numb a slow afternoon. So kids built things instead. They built tree houses and go-karts out of lawnmower engines. They built bands in garages with instruments held together by tape and stubbornness. They built entire summers around nothing more than a bicycle and a vague idea of where their friends might be. Boredom forced imagination to the surface, and imagination, given enough room, turned into identity. A teenager in 1958 might spend an entire Saturday just wandering, and somewhere in that wandering, they figured out who they were. Then there was the telephone, which sounds like a small thing until you really sit with what it meant. One phone. One line. Hanging on the wall in the kitchen, in full earshot of mom stirring a pot of soup. If a girl wanted to talk to a boy, she had to dial his house and hope his father didn't pick up first, and then she had to talk fast, because someone else might be waiting to use the line, and long-distance calls cost real money that nobody wanted to spend on teenage nonsense. There was no privacy in that conversation, and somehow that lack of privacy created its own strange intimacy. Every phone call mattered more because it was rationed. A 10-minute call from a boy you liked could carry the emotional weight of an entire relationship, because it was the only conversation you'd get until you saw him again at school, or at the soda fountain, or cruising the same stretch of road everyone cruised on a Saturday night. And that brings us to the car, which wasn't just transportation back then, it was a second home. A teenager's first set of wheels was freedom itself, rolling on 4 tires. Cruising the strip wasn't going anywhere in particular, it was the entire point. Kids would drive the same loop past the same drive-in, the same diner, the same gas station, again and again, just to be seen, just to see who else was out there. Nobody questioned what the destination was, because there wasn't supposed to be one. The car was where first kisses happened, where breakups happened, where entire friendships were forged over a shared tank of gas and a radio dial fought over by 4 restless hands. Gas was cheap enough that burning it just to feel alive wasn't reckless, it was Tuesday. School itself looked and felt different too. A teenager's social world in that era was almost entirely physical, built on proximity and chance encounters rather than constant digital contact. You didn't know what your friends were doing every minute of the day, you found out Monday morning at your locker, and there was something thrilling in that delay, and not knowing, and having to wait for the story. Reputations were built slowly, through years of being seen the same way in the same hallways, not assembled instantly out of posts and photos. If you embarrassed yourself, it lived in the memory of the people who actually witnessed it, and then it faded, the way memories do, instead of sitting frozen and searchable forever. Work came early too, and it came differently. Plenty of teenagers in this world had real jobs by 14 or 15, not for resume building, but because families needed the income, or because earning your own money felt like the most natural rite of passage there was. A paper route before sunrise. Mowing lawns all summer for a few dollars a yard. Babysitting the neighbor's kids on a Friday night for 50 cents an hour. These weren't resume lines, they were just what you did, and they taught a kind of responsibility that came baked into daily life rather than delivered through a lecture. A 14-year-old with a paper route understood deadlines, weather, and disappointed customers in a way that no classroom could teach. And dating itself followed rules so different from today that they barely seemed like the same activity. There was a structure to it. A boy called the house. A boy asked the father, sometimes literally, sometimes just by showing up at the door with visible nervousness. There were school dances with crepe paper streamers and punch bowls, and going steady meant something specific and almost ceremonial, a class ring on a chain, a varsity jacket draped over shoulders. Heartbreak was slower too, and somehow heavier, because there was no scrolling past it, no muting a name. You felt it in real time, walking past someone's locker, sitting 2 rows behind them in algebra, and you had no choice but to sit with that feeling until it passed on its own. Even silence was different. A teenager's bedroom in this era wasn't filled with the constant hum of notifications. If you were alone, you were actually alone, with a transistor radio maybe, with a journal, with your own unfiltered thoughts bouncing around with nowhere else to go. Loneliness wasn't broadcast to 1,000 followers for sympathy, it was just felt, privately, and then usually outgrown, the way most private things are. There was an entire emotional architecture built around solitude that simply doesn't exist anymore, because true solitude itself barely exists anymore. What's strange, looking back, is how much of that world ran on trust and on limits. Parents trusted kids because there was no other choice, no way to verify where anyone was every second of the day, so trust became the default setting of an entire era. And limits, the scarcity of money, of phone lines, of cars, of free time, forced creativity instead of stifling it. Teenagers didn't have infinite options, so they made infinite use of the few they had. That world didn't end with a single event. It eroded slowly, replaced piece by something faster and more connected and, in its own way, more isolating. The boredom got filled. The phone calls got replaced by texts that never run out of minutes. The cruising strip got replaced by a highway nobody drives just to be seen anymore. And somewhere in that slow replacement, an entire way of becoming a person quietly disappeared, leaving behind only static photographs, faded yearbooks, and the memories of the people who lived it, who still remember exactly what it felt like to hang on a phone cord, twisting it around a finger, waiting for someone to say something that mattered.